Greetings from Quarry Hill. Thanks for joining us. We're going to bring a little bit of the hidden portion of Quarry Hill to you. As we head into the entrance of the cave, I want you to look for 5 things. I want you to look for what we call a cubicle, crates, candle shelves, a hinge for a door, and also for the original pick marks. Come on in. Into this room here, you can see we have 6 candle shelves, and this is likely what it would have looked like for the workers. The people dropping off the food or picking up the food would have had no electrical lights. They wouldn't have had flashlights, and if you looked up, you would have seen what we think were the hinge points for some doors on these cubicles, which would have provided the proper conditions to store the food. And if you looked up even higher than those holes, you would have seen the original pick marks, which were the tools the men were using to carve the cave. If we look across the hall, we can see some examples of the original crates. So let's take a minute just to consider why all these things are here. Those of you familiar with southeast Minnesota might have visited other caves made by nature. This cave was made specifically by 6 patients that lived at a hospital not far from here, a hospital that opened in 1879 that became known as the Rochester State Hospital. It would eventually encompass nearly 1,500 acres of land, include a large farm, and this expansive campus that would house over 1,000 patients within 10 years of opening. This large population required a lot of food. Fortunately, the farm was very productive, but they still needed a place to store the food. Now, in the early 1880s, there wasn't electrical refrigeration, and so they needed to figure out a way to store enough food for all of these people for the year. Root cellars were very common at that time, and fortunately for the state hospital, this sandstone bluff was very nearby. So 6 patients and 1 hospital attendant were able to carve out of the St. Peter sandstone the 34 rooms that we're about to go see. In just a moment, we'll be walking down a long tunnel that will lead us to what we know as the horseshoe-shaped portion of the cave, where we will meet up again in the apple room and then the butter room. Welcome to the apple room. We're now standing inside the largest room of the cave. There's a couple of interesting things to see in here. If you look up, you'll see one of the ventilators. There are a number of these throughout the cave, the deepest of which is about 25 feet to the surface of the hillside above us. As you look around the room, you'll see some more of those candle shelves. You'll see some benches that we put in here for when we do classes. The room was designed to hold between 50 and 100 barrels of apples, and it was very good at doing just that. The cave was reported to be an excellent place to store food that would come out the following spring just as fresh as it was put in the previous fall. We're going to head now to the far end of this room to where there's a thermometer. We'll check in on what temperature it is today. As you can see, it's about 40 degrees Fahrenheit today, and that's pretty typical for this time of the year. The cave was a very good refrigerator in that it kept the food above freezing during the winter, and it kept it quite cool during the summer. No trip to the cave would be complete without talking about Mr. Thomas Coyne. And what you can see here is his last name, C-O-Y-N-E, traced here in the sandstone. And he, at one time, had carved a poem into the side of this wall, but it is long gone because of the graffiti that's been put over the top of it. The importance of Thomas Coyne is that he was a patient at the state hospital and is really the man credited with being the master cave carver. He worked for about 7 years on 3 caves in the area, this being the first. Thomas spent much of his time up here in the cave very happily carving and excavating and making the 34 rooms of this cave. Thomas altogether spent almost 30 years of his life in the state hospitals of St. Peter and the Rochester State Hospital. Just around the corner from Mr. Coyne's signature is the butter room, which is the second largest room in the cave, and we'll be passing through that in just a moment. On the far side of the room is a passageway that wasn't designed, but was later added by people that were playing in the cave, and gets a little bit wider every time people like us pass through it. We know it as the secret passageway, and it will lead us to the hallway that we know as the shrinking hallway. Here we go. Just come through the secret passageway. Now we're standing in the hallway again, where we see another notable feature from how this cave was used before. And we're looking down here at this portion of the wall where we've got some horizontal scratches. And those really are the scratches that were formed from the wagon wheels of the cart that they would pull through the cave. The idea was that a horse pulling a wagon could come in one of the 2 doors on this side of the hill, go in and drop off or pick up food, and continue on and go out the other door. And as you can see here, the turn was a little tight, and so the wheels often would rub up against this inner portion of the wall, even making it a little bit more concave down here in the center where the hub of that wheel was rubbing against the sandstone. We're just about to go down the last portion of the cave, which a lot of the Quarry Hill staff refer to as the shrinking hallway. It'll feel like it's shrinking because of the erosion that occurred before the wall went on and the floor has been built up. So let's go to the end of the cave together. Well, here we are at the end of the cave. We thank you for coming along with us. We've seen some interesting things, but we haven't seen them all. There's lots more we'd like to show you. Thanks for joining us.